Do you beat yourself up for not achieving the goals that you set at the start of each year? If you're like most people, that's what you do. Today, we're going to talk about how you can feel less guilty about not achieving a goal and understand how to set yourself up for success.
This is the Leading with Instinct podcast, focusing on intuitive leadership and fostering deep team connections through equine experiential leadership development and coaching. Brought to you by KatieTheCoach.com and the Collaboration Partners. Now, here's your hosts, Katie Navarra-Bradley and Ginny Telego.
Welcome back to the Leading with Instinct podcast, where we explore how we can lead with more authenticity, clarity, and connection, and what horses can teach us about the way we show up as leaders. I'm Katie Navarra-Bradley.
And I'm Ginny Telego.
Hi, Ginny. Happy New Year. How are you?
Hi, Katie. Happy New Year to you, too. I am doing well. I know that you have had a fair amount of snow and very wintry weather there in New York over the past couple of months. But I do have to tell you, winter in Southwest Colorado is really nice. It's sunny almost every day. The temperatures have been so nice, 30s, 40s. We've even had some days close to 70.
Wow.
Right around Christmas time. And so I'm not rubbing it in because I grew up in New York and spent most of my life between New York and Ohio. So I understand winter. But I got to tell you, I'm really enjoying being out here. So New Year's starting off pretty well so far.
That's great. You know, I've learned through your experiences living out in Colorado that it's not as cold and snowy there as I assume. You know, a lot of people head west to ski, and so I thought the whole state was similar to New York and Ohio, but you have shown me otherwise. So maybe when I retire someday, I will live in a warmer climate.
Yeah, well, we can get to the snow. That's what's really cool is it's only like an hour to 2 hour drive for us to get to snow. And it's a couple of hours to the mountains to ski. And so it's really nice because when we want that, we can go to it, but then we can come home. So yeah, being in this southwest area of Colorado where we're in kind of the high desert, and it's really a perfect place because we have the best of both worlds here. And no humidity.
Oh, you've got the trifecta then.
It is.
Well, I am looking forward to our conversation today because this is our official 1 year anniversary of launching. Yay, celebration. And the idea that we're going to talk about today really dovetails with how we started all of this back in September 2024. Mm-hmm. We set the goal of launching a podcast. So here we are. And I think it's important that we chat about, you know, how we set goals and what happens in the process of achieving them, or those times where we just don't quite make it across the finish line.
Yes. And, you know, I was thinking about that when we were preparing for our conversation. And, you know, just saying that we completed our first year of the Leading with Instinct podcast gives my brain a huge dopamine boost. Which makes me happy, right? Makes me feel good, makes me want more. I'm like, hey, I want to have this feeling more and more. And so it motivates me every month to do the work that needs to be done for us to prepare for and do this podcast. And so I'm excited today about this topic too, because it's something that we talk about all the time, both personally and professionally in our organizations. Leaders are constantly, being tasked with setting goals, and then the people who report to them, right? That's always comes up in performance appraisals. Like, what are your goals for the next year for yourself? Where do you want to grow? What do you want to accomplish? All of those things. And so, it is something that we are constantly putting ourselves through this process of setting goals. And, but a lot of times, for a lot of people, we get stuck when we're trying to set goals or frustrated, and we certainly feel that way when we're trying to achieve them. We have this great goal. I mean, how many times, Katie, I told you how often I had talked about starting a podcast, and people kept saying to me, Ginny, you need to do a podcast. that had been happening for a couple of years, and I just felt stuck, right? I was just like, I don't know, there's something that's not right. Then when you came along and we had the conversation, and it was just a no-brainer, and immediately, remember that in the moment when as soon as you brought it up, I was like, yes, that's exact right, dopamine boost right there. Right. Motivated, let's go. So yeah, I think it's something that can really resonate for people. So Katie, go ahead and get us started with kind of where this started to culminate in this conversation.
Sure. To your point, Ginny, we all sit down and create those goals. I've just completed my annual retreat for myself with my business and setting business goals. Mm-hmm. And especially the last 2 years, I've marveled over the fact how when I was working full time and building this business on the side, it seemed like I could crank out that daily to-do list and hit those goals. And then when I'm on my own, it's a little tougher to stay as focused or try not to get caught up in all of the day-to-day that it takes to run a small business on your own. And that can be frustrating, to your point. We feel like we're stuck and we're not really going anywhere. And it's not because as leaders that we're not capable or we're not motivated. I think if we collectively look at what we've accomplished and those of what our listeners have accomplished, we've done really big things, small things that lead to big things that we should all be proud of. But one of the things that I found really interesting, especially in some of my early experiences working with the horses, is that sometimes we get so stuck on focusing on the destination that we get lost in the direction of where we're going, and also maybe misidentifying which goals we should actually be chasing.
Mm-hmm. That's really powerful, and I love the way that you phrase that, because sometimes we have something in mind and then it changes, right? And one of the things that I've learned, I've worked with a lot of business coaches over the years for my own business, and one of the first things they would do is have me decide what my destination is, right? A certain amount of money, more time to do things that I enjoy, things like that.
The BHAG, right? The big,
right?
hairy, audacious
The big,
goal.
hairy, audacious goal. Yes. And they would always say to me, like when I was setting revenue goals, they would say, "Does that make you want to throw up? Because if it doesn't make you want to throw up, it's not big enough." And so I think that's important. But really, when we're setting goals, what we actually need to do is work backwards from that desired outcome, right? And my experience is that doing this allows us to see where we might need to be prepared to make adjustments along the way. So when my business coaches would say, have me set whatever my destination goal was, then they would say, okay, well, let's break it down now. How much revenue do you need to have each month in order to reach your destination goal? Whether that was a revenue goal specifically, or if I wanted to be able to have more time to do things I enjoy, how much revenue do I need to bring in each month in order to allow me to do that? And this has been really helpful to me. But, we often really do get focused on the destination, and that makes it hard to make course corrections along the way. And as we were putting this together, and I was doing my part on this, and I thought, wow, I have a great example of that, because at the start of 2019, I had set some pretty high realistic goals for my equine assisted learning and coaching business, because some new opportunities had opened up at the start of that year. And I was like, oh, wow, this is good. I think I'm going to really be able to get close to or achieve the goals that I've had for myself. And it did. It started off pretty well. And then on April 30th of that year, we lost our home and our pets in a fire. And talk about having to course correct. It was like,
Biggest course correction.
It was like, I'm going to the goal. And then the universe was like, nope, you're not. You are not going in that direction. And so it took some time, obviously, but I was eventually able to reassess the current reality and then adjust my path to my goals. And I still ended up achieving some of the things that I wanted to, but even more so, I celebrated the fact that despite that major detour, that I was able to get myself back on track and reassess. So I didn't get mad at myself that I didn't achieve the goal that I set, right? The destination that I had. I didn't get upset that I didn't get there in the time frame that I wanted to. What I did celebrate was I made it. I made it to the end of the year, and I made it, to the next year and the next year and the next year. And so I think what's fascinating is that this is really exactly where horses provide such a great example for us to follow, right? And I know that you see this, and this has been your experience, Katie. You've shared a lot with our listeners about sort of your journey with Winston, and how you've had to course correct through that. And this is what we see with horses and what we see in our work with clients with the horses. Horses are really good at getting to their desired destination, even if they have to change something along the way, because they're always noticing what's happening in the current reality and in the environment around them, and then they make adjustments using shared leadership. So they have other horses in the herd who are helping provide information that can help them make the decisions they need to in order to keep going where they need to go. And as I was thinking about this, and I know this is a lot of what happened for me after the fire, was I didn't do it on my own. I had other people who were alongside of me and around me who were, helping to guide me as I needed to, along the way. And so, I think as our listeners are setting goals for 2026, and I'm setting goals for myself, and I know, Katie, you've done your strategic planning, how can we engage with others to share leadership with us to help course correct along the way? And that way, for me, I think I don't get as overwhelmed. So I want to encourage people to be thinking about that as we go through this conversation of, who can you bring into your herd to be alongside you? Maybe it's just a matter of having somebody that you can say, hey, I'm feeling a little bit stuck on this, this part of my goal. I wondered if I could just, share my thinking with you or think out loud with you about it. And they may have another perspective that can help you course correct and get back on the path where you need to go.
There are so many things that you just shared, Ginny. You've made my mind spiral in many different directions.
You're welcome.
To your point of finding people who are in your herd, I think that has been the biggest change for me as a business owner, also as a horse owner. From the business perspective, we had a rough last 6 months of 2023. Fortunately, we did not lose our house, but we had several accidents that required surgery for my husband. We totaled a vehicle, lost a dog, all of the things, And so going into 2024 was a little bit challenging from a business perspective. And so, of course, business was down. And I'm a very goal-oriented person, and I just kept beating myself up about that. Like I hear from other leaders, I didn't hit this revenue number or launch this specific initiative by a date. And one big change for me was having joined the Entrepreneurs Organization in the capital region here of New York, to be surrounded by other business owners. We all sit and share our challenges as leaders and as business owners. And through that, we actually met a new financial planner. And it was kind of the reality check of, he kept saying, will you please stop saying you had a bad year? Because if you look at what you did not have a bad year. Was it less than 2023? Yes. But was it zero or barely enough to keep your household going or keep your horses going? And the answer was no. And so finding those people that can allow you to vent your frustration, share where things are getting stuff and tricky is really important, because we don't want to ignore them, but also then having the people that can give you the reality check of, let's frame this in context and see how dramatic it really is compared to where we're trying to go. And I even see that too with, you brought up Winston, and for our listeners who are not involved in the competitive horse world, there's this big focus, especially in the Western performance horse industry, to get these horses started young, like 18 months, 2 years old. Yeah. And we have begun following some colt starters who really study how the horse brain works and try to use the neuroscience of the horse brain with horse behavior And so we took a different path with Winston, and we sent him to a cult starter so that he learned that he had to have manners and he had to learn how to function in our world so none of us get hurt. But it wasn't about being performance ready. And he went for 90 days instead of a full year program. And I heard more than once from multiple people, you're going to be behind, you're going to be behind, you're going to be behind. And for me, there are reasons for that. People are doing it for different reasons. I don't have the desire to chase some of those titles, so it took that pressure off. And for me, I wanted a horse that was going to be sound, both physically and mentally, well into his 20s. And so you need to find folks who can help you affirm what you're thinking, even when it's right for you, but you're hearing different noise from others, because it can be tough. It can be very tough.
Yeah, for sure. And I appreciate you bringing that, out, Katie, and in your own experience and how you've had to navigate that. And what really caught my attention in what you're just talking about with Winston, though, is you said you want him to be physically, mentally, emotionally healthy into his 20s, right? So you have a destination in mind, and you have been navigating through that, taking these small steps along the way, knowing that there are times, and I know there have been times in the journey with Winston that you've had to course correct. What it seems like to me is when you've made course corrections, it's still because you still have that same destination that you're trying to get to for him and for you, right, with him. And that, to me, I think is where we do want to have a solid understanding and belief in our destination, right? I mean, for me, ultimately, right, it's the purpose of my work. That's always the ultimate destination for me is, how do I help leaders be less stressed? How do I help people work better together so that they can go home and enjoy their families and be productive parts of their community? Because all of that comes from them being able to navigate things, more in a more healthy way. But the path to get there is constantly changing and shifting for me. And, I went through a similar thing when I moved last year. And this year I had goals for myself this year out here, with rebuilding my business out here. It did not go at all as planned because other life things got in the way this year that needed my attention. And I wanted to put my attention there. And so I did go through a period this fall of really beating myself up and saying, "Oh my gosh, I didn't do enough. I must have been lazy this year, But at the end of the day, I had some people who said, "Okay, hold on, Ginny. Wait a minute. First of all, you moved." Right? You're in a whole new place to have to rebuild your business. That takes a lot of time. You had these other things that really needed your attention. All things considered, same thing. Did you lose money? No, I didn't lose money. And so at the end of the day, it is really helpful, I think, sometimes having other people who can just help you put things in perspective so that you don't go down that rabbit hole of punishing yourself, if you didn't achieve a specific thing.
I think that's such an excellent point, Ginny. And one of the other things that just came up for me as you're talking about that and having another person. In our previous episode, we talked about imposter syndrome. And literally in December, before we filmed or recorded this podcast, I was talking to another coach. We've had some changes in the facility where we can host our equine assisted events. And I kept saying, if I could manifest where I want to be able to partner with the facility and hold these, this is where it would be. And I've been trying to figure out who I can network with to get me in to get that meeting. And she's actually a coach and HR trainer as well. And she says, just send an email. What are you waiting for? And sometimes we also need those people to push us into action on our goals.
Yeah.
And with the help of some templates and resources that you shared with me and some of my own massaging on the message, I hit send. And literally 2 days later, I got the most enthusiastic response back from the executive director. And we set up a meeting to discuss that after the new year. So the outcome is still TBD, but the response was very positive. And sometimes it just takes that little push from somebody in our inner circle to say, suck it up, do the work, and move towards that goal. Because goals are great, but if we don't take steps at the same time, we're never going to get there.
That's so funny because I had that exact same thing happen in November. I had to find a new facility out here. And I was like, oh my gosh, what am I, where am I going to work? And I don't want to be marketing it's my business if I don't have a place to work and
Yes.
all the things, right? Where I was going down the rabbit hole. And then I remembered that our realtor had told me about a facility that was like 35 minutes away from me that she actually had told me about them as a possible place to board my horses when we first moved out here if I needed to. But I was like, oh, I went to the website and I was looking at it and I said, boy, I don't know. I don't know if this is anything they would be interested in. But I wrote the email and I also sent a message on Facebook through Facebook Messenger to the place. And I got an immediate response back from the ranch manager. And her response was, oh my gosh, we would love to partner with you. This sounds so exciting. I looked at your website. I love what you do. And it was like the universe going, okay, now we're going to be on track. And just that being in place has already moved me forward exponentially towards my goals. And so you're right, Katie. It's taking that first step, and that's really what the horses teach us, right? When we're working with the horses, we're not going to get from point A to point B if we don't at least take a step forward. But we have to be willing to make adjustments along the way.
Absolutely. So I thought it would be interesting for our listeners if we talk about how horses can show us direction and why it creates movement when focusing on the destination doesn't. We see it all the time in the arena, how horses don't respond well to leaders who fixate on the endpoint that we've given them in the activity. If we tell them that they need to move to a cone and they're staring at that cone that they want to reach, but their body, their energy, and their intention aren't aligned, that congruence, that the horse stops, hesitates, or just doesn't move at all. And I think we both see that at first the jump is that the horse is stubborn. But it's really not that at all. The horse is responding to having an unclear direction of where to go and how to move.
Yeah, I think that it's so funny because I think this is what makes one of the things that makes our work so powerful is regardless of who it is, where we are, any of those things, the same things show up over and over and over again, which is why we know this is a pattern for human beings. and I've had the same thing, right? Is just I know I want the horse to go here, but I don't know how to get there. Like that's oftentimes once we move past the horse is stubborn, the horse is lazy, the horse doesn't like me conversations. Then it starts to be about, well, what's your plan to get there? And they'll say, I don't know. I don't have a plan. Well, okay, that's a great destination, but you got to make at least some forward movement. And that's really when the unlocking starts to happen, right? And sometimes it is us just saying to them, no, literally, just start walking.
Right.
And,
Exactly.
they look at us and sometimes we have to say it a few times, like, no, I'm really serious. Just start walking. And they start walking. And then we can have the conversation about shifting your energy and how shifting your energy to start moving towards the goal is really the first thing you need to do. You can adjust your energy along the way. Maybe you need to slow it down. Maybe you need to speed it up, whatever that is. And that's exactly what is happening when we set a goal, right? Sometimes we need to get moving a little more quickly towards the goal. We need to put a little more energy into it. Sometimes we're a little too enthusiastic about it and we need to slow down and kind of reassess what's happening. But that is the beauty of the horses as our co-facilitators, is that they give that non-judgmental feedback. If they're not moving, it's really because they don't have clarity about where you want them to go. And how often does that really happen for us when we're setting goals? And also that we're not bringing the energy that's needed to help the horse understand that you want them to start moving. And that happens as well, even in organizations, when a leader sets goals and their people aren't actually going in that direction, they're not moving. It becomes about, well, what's your energy? How are you showing up towards this goal?
And I think one of the other really powerful lessons that this work can show us is that sometimes we might not even have the right goal, right? We spend maybe a few hours, a few days, a week planning what our goals are for the year or quarterly throughout the year. And sometimes we just might not have the right goal. This really stuck out to me the very first time that I participated in an equine assisted leadership workshop. This was before I was a facilitator. Our mutual friends, Marie Claude and Larry Stockel, invited myself and 2 others to participate in a half-day session. They were very generous with their time so that we could see what the work was all about. And they had a few horses newer to the program that they wanted to see how they would react to the work, because not every horse is immediately ready or wants to do the work that we ask of them.
Right.
And so for one of the activities, Marie Claude and Larry asked the 3 of us to separate one of the horses from the small herd of 3 that were all loose in the arena together. And we had to encourage that horse to walk 200 feet to the opposite end of the arena with us. And because most of us were horse people, we were not allowed to use the horseman's easy tricks with the halter and the lead rope. We needed to find a way to have the horse connect with us and move with us. And I'll tell you what, we tried and we tried and we tried. And no matter what we did, we could not get one horse to leave the herd and move with us. So after, giving us time with multiple attempts and trying to figure out different strategies, they called the activity to an end. Part of the reasons, it was cold. It was February in upstate New York. Plus it was windy, and these horses were all new to the work. And instead of allowing us to see as quitting or just giving up on the goal, they reframed it for us as, geez, did you have the right goal for the right moment in time? And it really makes me think, how often as leaders do we set goals for our teams that might not be right for that exact moment? It doesn't mean that you abandon them altogether,
Right.
but is it a goal that everybody can, quote unquote, win at in that moment?
Well, right. And that's where the understanding the current reality comes in. It's so easy for us to set goals and then not take into account what's actually happening in the current environment, whether it's personally or professionally. And I think that's a beautiful example, right, of having to do that. And I've had similar experiences. I was thinking about one of my clients that had a really clear goal for her career. She was mid-career and wanted to make a change because she was in a kind of a toxic culture environment. And so first we got some clarity around what we thought clarity on. She wanted to work in an organization where there was a culture that was more healthy for her and where she felt respected in her role and for her education and her experience and those type of things. And so this was part of a broader coaching that we were doing. And so the horses were one part of it. And so she went into the arena with one of my horses, and she kept wanting to overanalyze how to get the horse from point A to B, right? So maybe a little too much of the how do I get there. But then again, she also wanted it to be a straight, organized path, right? So as she's doing all of this, the horse is not moving, horse just standing there, and not kind of falling asleep, actually. And so we had some discussion about the fact that there wasn't any movement. She was talking a lot about the goal and how important it is to her and how she thinks that she can get there, but she wasn't moving. And so when we paused and reflected on that, what she realized is she really just was unsure about how to start towards this destination, right? Because it meant she was going to have to leave her current job. And, and there's all kinds of stuff around that, even when it's a toxic environment. So we ended up breaking it down into smaller steps, and this then allowed her to make adjustments along the way with the horse. And so we actually broke down those steps as paralleling it to the steps that she would need to take in order to move towards her goal, right? Of like, okay, you're gonna need to set a date of when you want to give your notice, and then what's that conversation look like? Who do you need to have that conversation with? We literally broke it down into those steps, and each step she took with the horse represented one of those steps. And she ended up getting to where she wanted to go with the horse. And so what she realized is when she shifted her focus from, I need to get there, to saying, I need to lead clearly myself in this instance, in this moment, and just take the steps that I need to take in order to get where I need to go. And by her providing that kind of clarity of direction along the way to the horse trusted her. The horse trusted her as the leader, and that created the movement. And it was beautiful to watch, right? From her being stuck in her thinking and how that physically showed up with the horse, to when she started making the movements and the horse coming with her, she started to understand what the energy shift was like in order to move where she needed to go.
That sounds like it was a beautiful moment. And as you were talking about that, it reminds me of a workshop I did for a team. And it was a little bit of a larger group, so we actually split them into two groups. And the goal was for them to move a herd of horses from an outside area inside. And they were all really incredibly enthusiastic and excited, but the focus was on the destination and not the direction. And so we had horses ping-ponging everywhere. It became chaotic. We actually had to call a timeout so that no one, horses or human, got hurt. And as soon as they, what was great was to see the energy between their teammates, because they all were coming together to make this happen. Mm-hmm. But once they paused and realized they needed a little bit more clarification on who was going to play what role within the process, then all of a sudden it just flowed. Within 3 minutes, they had achieved the task that was taking them, 10 minutes before. So
I love that. I love that.
So Ginny, how do leaders set goals that provide direction without locking themselves into a rigid destination?
Well, I think that's really the start of it right there. Start with direction. Like, what's the direction that you want and need to take in order to get there, right? So don't get over focused on the destination so much that you get tunnel vision and you're not able to be making those smaller steps that you can, and that things you can adjust. So as always, Katie and I, do some research to find some data out there. And there are some evidence-based and experiential strategies that leaders can utilize to strengthen their confidence and develop some resilience to changing direction when needed. Because that's some of the other piece of this is it's uncomfortable when we have to shift direction or pause or whatever that is, because then all kinds of self-talk starts to come into play if we're not doing it right, we're failure, whatever. And so we do have to build some resilience to being able to be more agile in getting to where we want to go. And so one of the questions that you can ask yourself is, instead of saying, okay, I need to achieve this by this time, right? That's our traditional goal setting with SMART goals, right? Everybody's heard SMART goals: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, right? But instead start asking, how do I want to be moving towards my ultimate destination, right? Maybe it's around, I need more clarity. So you can say, okay, I'm moving towards greater clarity about my goal. because sometimes you really need to do that first before you can do anything else. Maybe the goal is too ambiguous. There's nothing worse than ambiguous goals. Another one is you might say to yourself, okay, I'm building momentum towards my goal, right? That's about energy. Or maybe it's, I'm strengthening trust in myself and others who can help me achieve my goal. That's a directional thing, right? That's something that you're saying, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to have greater clarity towards my goal. I want to build momentum. I want to strengthen trust in myself. So those are all things you can do. And again, it's like the horses. The horses respond to clear direction, not abstract endpoints. And that, for me, is really where I see people get stuck in their goals setting and achieving their goals, is it's just too ambiguous. And which is where the SMART goals thing came from, right? Is the science behind that. We need to have some more clarity. But you also have to trust yourself to be able to make adjustments along the way, that you have the ability to manage the momentum.
I think that's so important. As I have worked more with the horses, both facilitating and just with my own, that flexibility and patience is really key. I myself, like to have things happen and like to have them happen in a certain order by a certain time. And life doesn't work that way. And the horses also do not live life that way.
Nope, not at all.
And so, to your point, they teach us how to be flexible, and increase our resilience and persistence to just keep moving in a direction, even if it requires taking a few steps to the left, a few steps to the right, or adjusting the pace. And you mentioned momentum, which I also think is really an important point to make, because a lot of times I know I find myself, other leaders have shared that they lock into these long-term destinations. We used to talk about strategic planning as 3, 5, 10 years into the future. And a lot of business development meetings I've been sitting in recently have been saying that that's too long.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
The post-COVID world, the world that we're living in with tariffs and inflation. So they're really talking about 1-year plans.
Yep.
It's not bad to still have an idea of where you want to be in 10 years.
Right.
But really it's the 1-year plan, the 2-year plan that's the focus of what's happening in some of the biggest businesses, around us today.
Well, because breaking it down like that allows you to have more flexibility without feeling like you're abandoning the bigger plan. Right? Yeah. I mean, when you're breaking down strategy into, okay, what do we need to be paying attention to in the next 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year? Because that is the reality right now for companies. And I think shifting now out of that whole, we're going to create this long-term, even 3-year plan, and people get locked into that, right? And when they get locked into it, it makes it hard. I think it makes it hard sometimes to adjust and flex the way they need to. And so, one of the things that people can do is they can also look at these shorter horizons, right? And say to myself, okay, what does forward motion look like in the next 30 days? And what's a step that confirms I'm headed in the right direction? For me, I finally got, back on track for my business this fall with doing business development out here. And so I did exactly this. I said, okay, what does forward motion look like in the next 30 days? And I put, okay, I need to attend as many meetings as I can, business development meetings, like, because there's lots of chamber events happening in Colorado Springs. And when I said, what's a step that I need to, that'll confirm that I'm headed in the right direction, was going to those meetings. And some of them were hard. I had to get up at 5:30 in the morning to drive to Colorado Springs at 6:30 to get to a meeting that started at 7:30. I just want to share with the listeners, I'm not a morning person. Getting up at 5:30 for me is just, I just thinking about it makes me tired. And so I'm on a different schedule. My horses aren't on an early morning schedule, but I knew if I wanted to feel like I was making forward motion, I needed to do it. And so those are some things that you can do for yourself to break it down into some smaller steps.
I love how you have reframed goal setting and smaller steps towards momentum. It can really help us feel that goals don't have to be heavy or constraining. And when leaders focus on the direction instead of the destination, they can create clarity, trust, and momentum for themselves and for others. And really, it's the horses that remind us that direction is something that we embody and we don't just declare we're going to do.
Yes, that is so true. And I think just watching the horses move from one place to another, which I do most all day because they're right outside my window. So I watch my horses move from one side of the pasture to the other. Sometimes they move quickly, sometimes they move slowly, but there's always purpose and the direction they're going and the pace that they're going. And they have a goal they're trying to get to. So I think, as we're kind of leaving our listeners with some things that hopefully will help them as they're setting their goals for 2026 is it's not about controlling the future. You cannot control the future. Please don't even try to control the future because you will just, you'll go insane. But it's about choosing a direction that fits who you are and then moving forward with intention. What are the small steps? And celebrating those small steps. Give yourself grace if things don't go exactly as you hoped they did. And from the bigger piece of this, Katie, I am so appreciative for this past year working with you. This has been so much fun. I can't wait for our next year. Katie and I are already brainstorming on what we're going to be doing for 2026 for you as listeners. Thank you so much for listening to everyone out there. Thank you for following us and being part of the Leading with Instinct herd. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone else who maybe feels stuck. Go back and listen to it again yourself if you need to, if you're feeling stuck, and really take a hold of some of these things that we've offered that the horses have taught to us as well. So as you enter the new year, stay grounded, stay connected, and always lead with instinct.
This has been the Leading with Instinct podcast, focusing on intuitive leadership and fostering deep team connections through equine experiential leadership development and coaching. The Leading with Instinct podcast is brought to you in partnership with the Collaboration Partners, harnessing the collective human potential in organizations since 2009, providing equine experiential learning for lasting change. Get in touch at thecollaborationpartners.com and by katiethecoach.com, helping entrepreneurs and business leaders reset, reconnect, and reframe to live their best professional and personal lives. Visit katiethecoach.com for more information. For more information about equine experiential development and coaching and the Leading with Instinct podcast, visit www.leadingwithinstinct.com. The Leading with Instinct podcast is available at leadingwithinstinct.com, on the Leading with Instinct YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Subscribe today, and thank you for listening to the Leading with Instinct podcast.